starts.
On your mark.
Get set.
Get set.
Now ready.
Ready, go.
Provocative, engaging, and usually quite a lady.
Okay, they're asking for it.
Deborah, go.
I know a lot of people that stay away from politics. They're not interested in politics. They don't want to hear about politics. They certainly don't talk about politics. My position on that attitude is whether you think about it or not, whether you listen to it or talk about it, or whether you don't. It doesn't change anything. The fact of the matter is, politics affects you. It really, really does. And I think most of us get that, but I'm really talking about the people that say they want nothing to do with it. One of the main reasons why is that people say their votes don't matter. They don't count. But the other reason is because they say you cannot trust politicians. They lie all the time. Now, I don't agree with that statement either. I do believe that politicians will be politicians, that they campaign, and sometimes they make promises that sometimes they try and keep, and sometimes they had no intention of even attempting to keep. That does happen, and I guess that's why for a lot of people, they say politicians and used car salespeople are in the same boat. They rank about the same, and I really think that that's really a slam against used car salespeople, because there's some really good used car salespeople. There are some bad ones too. There are politicians who I give them thumbs up. They're good guys. They're trying to do what's right. But that's not who I want to talk about right now. I'm just going to make 4 examples. I'm going to highlight 4 examples of what I'm calling this devastatingly dangerous pattern I'm seeing of head faking, where politicians, this is deeper than making a campaign promise. This is so much more than, saying something to attract a vote. No, I'm talking about people who are blatantly misleading you, attempting to mislead everybody. I'm talking about people who are lying through their teeth, looking straight into the camera, and know that they are lying and they're just doing it with impunity. And we're seeing this more and more. So how does that differ from the way politicians have always acted? This really is different. This is so different. And here's the real reason why it's different. This is about more than, hey, I'm not going to raise your taxes this year and then turn around and raise the taxes. This is deeper than that. This is so deep because these flagrant lies, the things that they're lying about, they have the potential to really radically change our country. Oh, don't exaggerate, but I'm not exaggerating. Let me just run by you a couple of examples of recent head fakes. Now, Governor Pritzker, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, I was just sitting down earlier and I was just reading this long list of just outrageous falsehoods that he has made. He's pretty clever and he has very deep pockets, so I think he's pretty adept at covering for himself, but then sometimes it's just no covering. But when he talks about this immigration issue, illegal immigration issue here in Illinois, once again, he's really playing a very slick game. I mentioned in a previous podcast that Illinois, the state of Illinois, is on track to spend about $1 billion on the health care for illegals. Now, even the officials in the state are saying that's a bit much Because it's a whole lot much. It's a lot of money because who? The taxpayers will have to pay that. But I want you to hear how Governor Pritzker, he just is so adept at spinning stories and passing the buck and just outright lying. Or be gentle, Deborah. Or certainly trying to convince you that something is when it really isn't.
Wanted to make sure that there was a public statement out there of many of the things that we've talked about in the past with the administration, but the things that we need right now. We know that we're starting to see more and more buses. It is, as everybody should recall, let's not forget why we're seeing those buses. It's because there are these border politicians, the borders of the United States have politicians who want to cause havoc in the rest of the country.
You gotta be kidding me.
Not so fast there, J.B. Pritzker. It was J.B. Pritzker, not border politicians, who just a couple of months ago, literally 2 months ago, he signed something that they called the Trust Act here in Illinois. This was House Bill 121, Senate Bill 667, Senate Bill 1596, and Senate Bill 2665. He put them into law. And what that legislation, or those pieces of legislation did, they expanded protections for immigrants and refugee communities, not my words, these are their words, and further established Illinois as the most welcoming state in the nation. And as I've mentioned in a previous podcast, words have meaning. So please read welcoming state as sanctuary state. It was Governor Pritzker who just 2 months ago, he expanded upon what former governor, who also happened to have been a Republican, I shouldn't say also, who was a Republican, Bruce Rauner, he signed into legislation a law that would prohibit state and local police from stopping people based on their immigration status. So there was already the beginnings of this sanctuary state thing. Oh, but Pritzker took it so much further. So much further. Under the Trust Act, it requires local officials to end partnerships with ICE. That's right, you heard me. They had to end partnerships with ICE. It addressed hate crimes against immigrant communities. It expanded workplace protection for DACA recipients. It created the Illinois Immigration Impact Task Force, and that's to ensure that state programs and policies best serve the immigrant residents. But, there is so much more. And this was actually separate from those bills that he signed. It was Governor Pritzker who signed a bill giving illegals, immigrants, full licenses. They used to have to have these visitor licenses if they weren't citizens. But he said, no. They can have a regular license just like anybody else. They'll last for 4 years. And having those actual licenses, those regular licenses, they'll come in pretty handy come election time, don't you think? So who really is creating havoc? Those steps, forcing federal officials to stay away, don't come into the state of Illinois if you're there to get illegals. That's his move. That's what I call a head fake. You're saying one thing, trying to push the blame on someone else, when it is you, J.B. Pritzker. You're at the core. You're the reason for this big influx. Well, you're one of the reasons. You've got some partners in crime, to be sure. And since I'm already on the issue of immigration, let me just talk about Brandon Johnson, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, for just a moment. You want to talk about a head fake? This guy was on television yesterday, and you want to listen to just an amazing head fake. Check this out.
This is a global crisis. The policies that are impacting population shifts around the globe is affecting us all. These are asylum seekers. These are not illegal people. The moment they step ground on American soil, they are now officially protected by international law.
That doesn't even make any sense. I know.
I've told you before, Brandon Johnson is a little slicker than I initially gave him credit for being. A couple of things. Yes, this is now a global crisis. He is right about that. But the question is, why has it become a global crisis? Now, granted, there are some natural reasons, and then there are some orchestrated reasons. Things like earthquakes and tsunamis and even war, which isn't really natural, but those kinds of things have caused refugees. But I have said it, and I'm going to say it again and again and again. These people coming into Chicago, by and large, overwhelmingly, these are not refugees. These are not asylum seekers. And Brandon Johnson knows good and full well that these are not asylum seekers. You see, Amnesty International and other relief organizations and NGOs, they have for years had very specific definitions and terminology for asylum seekers and refugees. These are just people illegally crossing over into the country. Now, something else he said. He said that if they put 1 foot on U.S. soil, they have international law protection. Well, not so fast, Brandon. 2 things. It was, 2-3 days ago that President Biden, he did issue this TPS, this temporary protected status for Venezuelans. And there are a lot of Venezuelans in Chicago. So they have this protection temporarily, and that's because Brandon Johnson, Governor Pritzker, members of the business community, and I'm assuming maybe a few other groups, want the Venezuelans to be given their work permits. They want those work permits expedited. They want them to get to work. The business community is saying we could really use those people. And it just makes it easier for everyone. I'm going to go into this a little bit deeper. I didn't mean to do this here, but I have to. Now, this is where the head fake comes in yet again. As far as them getting to work and it easing the burden of the taxpayer, actually, it really, really doesn't. But they'll be working. Yes, they will. And I actually learned about this by watching Victor David Hanson, one of our best and brightest modern intellectuals. But he has been doing quite a number of videos on this illegal immigration situation here in this country. And one of the things he very clearly points out is that just Mexico, now I'm not even getting into the other groups, but just illegal Mexicans, they send billions. I had to emphasize that. That's what the B. They send billions of dollars back home in these remittances. You see, if you go through a lot of Spanish neighborhoods, a lot of Mexican neighborhoods, you'll see the signs up. You can send remittances here. Sometimes it's a currency exchange or sometimes it's some other kind of business. The point being, the money that they're making, even if they're sending home $300, $400, $500 every week, every couple of weeks. That's a lot of money. Hey, so how are they paying for their food and their housing? How are they paying for a bunch of other things? We pay for those things, so we're subsidizing them. Yeah, they can work, but they get to send the money back home. This is actually well documented. These are head fakes. This is what I'm talking about. They're telling us one thing, but they're hiding their hand while they are orchestrating and letting something else happen that's really not helping us at all. Let's be real clear about this. And I also want to go back to something that Brandon Johnson said. He said, this is a global issue. And I agree, it is a global issue, but it's not just because of natural occurrences. You cannot convince me that all of this movement of migration, as they like to call it, around the globe, and yes, it is happening around the globe. Now, you have this pocket, this segment of people who will readily tell you the reason we're seeing people moving from one country to the other, they're in danger because of climate change. Yes, they are saying this, that climate change is affecting the crops, that climate change is causing this, that climate change is causing that, and they are fleeing. That's a bunch of bunk. If we want to talk about people fleeing, they're not fleeing out of fear, most of these people. They're fleeing because they want to hurry up and get to their new host country. It's what Joe Biden did when he became president. He made this big announcement. Hey, if you can get here within the first 100 days, Jack, you're in. And that triggered this most recent surge of illegal immigration. It's what happened in Germany back when Angela Merkel was the chancellor. I guess that's what they still call the German president. That's what she did. We've got free everything. It's free. Come to our country, free. But does that really make sense? Germany wasn't having necessarily a robust economic situation. So why bring all of these people in? The U.S., when Biden took office, we were still, digging out of COVID. We've had businesses still closed and people got being comfortable not going to work. It wasn't a bustling economy. So why tell, hey, anybody, everybody, if you can just get here, you're here, you're in. It doesn't add up. I mean, it's not just the U.S. It's not just Germany. It's happening in Saudi Arabia. And that's a kingdom. The king really could say, get away. But no, they're open. They're receiving a lot of immigrants. Many other parts of Europe. There was just something that happened, a couple weeks ago, maybe? This tiny island in Italy. It's an island. They have about 6,000 residents. Well, guess what? They look out onto the ocean and here come ships. And these ships had 6,000 plus people who were coming to the island. They were quote unquote refugees. So like within hours, they had doubled their population because of the influx of these illegals, people that came there. Now, there are so many people that are saying, but you have to understand, and particularly when we talk about this island, Lampedusa in Italy, they were fleeing economic poverty. They were starving. They were hungry. That too can be an exaggeration. I mean, again, I've said this every time I've talked about this. I really, truly don't blame people for wanting to do better. That's not where my first argument lies. My first argument always lies with the host country that doesn't share this with their citizenry. They make up lies. They tell you that everything's fine. Our borders are secure. We're fighting this immigration problem, and they aren't. No, They're flying them through the country late at night. They're giving them cell phones in hotels and pushing police out of the way and filling up police stations and schools. And they're just doing things that the citizens have had no say-so in. This is the head fake. We're trying. No, you're not trying. You're lying. You're telling people you're trying, and you're doing the direct opposite. That's why Pritzker can stand up before the media in a press conference and tell you, but don't you forget how this all started. It's those border politicians. But he's the one that signed the legislation saying, come. And if you are with the Immigration and Naturalization, or ICE, rather, don't you come here. These people can come here. He's the one. They've already budgeted $1 billion to pay for the health care of illegals. He's the one who has signed into legislation that illegals can have ordinary, I'm calling them ordinary, driver's licenses, not visitor licenses. And I say illegals because some of them most certainly will be, if not all of them. So these are, and I use the word head fake because I'm just thinking about how they do it in football. They make you think they're running one way, but they're actually going someplace else. It's not to help you, though. It's to help themselves. All right, I've got another one here. Karine Jean-Pierre, KJP. I mean, this girl, she's really not that good with the head fake, but I'm just thinking how brazen she is. I mean, this girl is brazen. Check this out.
The president has done more to secure the border and to deal with this issue of immigration than anybody else. He really has. June saw the single largest month-to-month drop in unlawful border crossing because of the policies this president put in place.
Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie.
And a lot of people listening to that saying, I don't think so. But the U.S. is only slightly off its record pace for migrant encounters set just last year. And border encounters do remain at an all-time high since 1960, the earliest year on record.
By the way, that audio was from News Nation. Do you see what I mean when I say just brazen? I mean, there are some things you expect from a politician, stretching the truth a little bit here and there. But this is just brazen. If you take a look at images that you don't get as often on the network news, but certainly on Fox and maybe at one or two other places, they have drones where they just watch this stuff 24/7. That border is wide open. People are flooding every single day. And not just by, crossing, walking over. They're on trains. They are on boats. I mean, they're doing it all. They're flying in. Yeah, they are. Yet she stands there and says, this president has done more to protect the border than anyone else. Yeah, he really has. And then the News Nation report, they put the data up on the screen. This is like the worst ever. Since they started keeping records. They know this. Yet, they're telling you, don't believe your lying eyes. What you see around you, what you're hearing about, what you're watching, don't believe it. Believe us. Another glaring issue that we should remember, it happened with England. And I'm not talking about ancient history here. I'm talking about just a few years back. Remember when Great Britain decided to leave the EU, the European Union? The reason they did that was because they were tired of the EU making decisions for them. They wanted their sovereignty. And what was the main thing that the EU was pushing? Remember? They wanted Great Britain to open its borders, to allow illegals, which they always call migrants and refugees and asylum seekers, to flood into the country. And they said no, they didn't want it. Well, of course, the country was divided, but the majority said no. And a very interesting aspect to that whole saga was when President Obama, he went over there and he issued a warning to Great Britain that were they to leave the European Union, they would move to the back of the line when it comes to trade. That was heavy duty stuff. That was a literal threat. You stay in the EU, in other words, and you do what the EU tells you to do when it comes to opening your borders for illegals. And if you don't, you'll pay a price. That blew me away. That really did. That blew me away. So just the point I'm making here, none of this is by happenstance. This is not coincidental. This is not because of climate change. This is a very well-planned event, a series of events. Why? That's the big question. Why? And as far as I'm concerned, and you could say, man, I didn't know you were such a conspiracy theorist. No, I really do believe that there are so many leaders and people who are not leaders. In the U.S., we would call them shadow government types, groups like the World Economic Forum and others that want nothing more than a removal of all borders. They want a globalize is one thing, but a one world system. And that seems really far-fetched. But please start putting 2 and 2 together. This just in. The Department of Homeland Security posted this announcement on the U.S. Federal Registry with details outlining the construction of a wall. President Biden waives 26 federal laws to allow border wall construction. Quote, there is presently an acute and immediate need to construct physical barriers and roads in the vicinity of the border of the U.S. to prevent unlawful entries into the U.S. in the project areas, said Alejandro Mayorkas, DHS secretary. Amongst the 26 federal laws waived, the Clean Air Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, and Endangered Species Act for the wall construction. The money will come from a congressional appropriation back from 2019 for wall construction. The construction can add up to 20 miles to the wall, but there is great concern from environmentalists that the 20-mile wall will endanger the habitats of already endangered plants and species. Well, I guess you're thinking, Deb, what about the head fakes? I think I'd better use the Wayback Machine. On January 20th, 2001, President Biden signed an executive order to end border wall construction projects and to redirect taxpayer dollars elsewhere. But where? Quote, building a massive wall that spans the entire southern border is not a serious policy solution. It is a waste of money that diverts attention from genuine threats to our homeland security. Biden's executive order paused work on every construction project on the southern border wall within 7 days after he took office and paused the obligation of funds related to the wall. He also rescinded Trump's National Declaration of Emergency at the border, which Trump put in place February 2019. So, yeah, I guess, yay. Biden's going to build 20 additional miles to the existing barrier. Just remember now, Trump constructed 450 miles of border wall. And the Congress, the Democrats in the Congress fought him every step of the way. So to wrap up today's podcast, let me say this. Yes, that breaking news is interesting. Waiving 26 federal laws to allow border wall construction, and that's a good thing. But why is that happening? Because it's yet another head fake. That's right. That's all this is. I'll give you 3 reasons why I think so. And if I'm wrong, I'll tell you when to bring that to my attention. It'll be sometime in 2024, latter part of the year. But this is just another head fake. Here's why this is happening. Number 1, it's the election. The election's coming. And as we are speaking right now, as I'm speaking, Donald Trump, in some polls, he is in a statistical tie with Joe Biden. But in many, many other polls, even more polls, Donald Trump is about 10 points ahead of Joe Biden. That's number 1. And number 1, part 2. Polls show, out of all the things that have been thrust in front of us over these last 3 years, voters care about 2 things more than anything else. They care about the economy and they care about border security. 1 and 2. And people, again, polls show that they don't think Biden's done a good job with the polls. They don't think Biden's done a good job with the border. By contrast, lots of people think Trump did his very best to secure our borders. So think about that. There's the other thing. They can't very well tell the illegals coming across the border, hey, wait until after the election. Well, they actually did that before and it worked, but it only worked because Trump wasn't going to just let them flow in. So they had to wait. They had to wait for Biden. But now the floodgate has been open, so he could say it all day and all night. Hey, wait, slow down, wait until after the election and then start again. Nobody's going to listen to that. The border is so porous, you're not going to be able to stop them even if you beg them not to come. And then thirdly, and this is not as prevalent or as significant as the other 2, but there are those environmentalists. And the environmentalists, and I typically say the radical environmentalists, they are not happy at all with this waiver that he's doing of these federal laws, again, because it will impact some of the wildlife there, some of the protected habitats. They don't like it. And just in case you were unaware, it was the activist environmentalists who were also pressuring Joe Biden when he came into office to stop building that wall. As a matter of fact, the USA Today article from 2021, they mentioned that. You didn't really hear a lot about that. So I suspect big head fake, once the election is over, and that is if Biden wins, it'll be back to business as usual. The illegal flow will go up even more than it has before the election.
Diabolical.